Chodesh Tov, everyone. I'm so honored to be here, stepping in to fill Sarah's big shoes for the next couple of months. And Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. As Mark said, we are in ER now. We are in Rosh Chodesh over this Shabbat, and we're celebrating this new moon. And this moon of ER is one that in Jewish tradition is typically associated with healing. And I think it's important to point out that sometimes the word or the concept of healing implies a sense of ease, but healing can be really complicated and it can be really hard. And it usually is not at all a linear path. In the Hebrew calendar, we are in a liminal time right now. People are wandering in this really strange threshold space between the liberation that we found last month over Pesach and the revelation and receiving of Torah that's coming on Shavuot. And so here we are, we're wandering barefoot in the wilderness with manna, maybe a few things on our backs, having had the courage to walk out of the narrow, constricting places of the Mitzrayim, Egypt, but have not yet received our Torah, have not yet found our way to Zion. And so, in this sense, it really is a wandering and not at all a straight road, not clean or efficient or even moving in one direction. And I think probably everybody has experienced healing like this, right? Where there are setbacks, there's periods of fatigue, confusion, maybe resistance, and maybe just really long stretches where it's not clear if anything is happening at all. I think we all have examples, whether you're undergoing or in the midst of a grief or a loss process or healing from physical injury, past inner trauma. In my background, before I worked with At the Well, I have a background in conservation, actually, and ecological restoration, and in observing how the earth and how nature heals and recovers over time. It's the same process. It's often very slow and winding and riddled with setbacks. So when we speak about ER as this month of healing, I think it's just really important to center that it's not a promise of instant repair or some type of like easy spiritual bypass. It is a journey, and the journey is not a luxury cruise with a nice spa and drinks by the pool. It is a hard journey, and also letting go of perfection and this idea that if we practice and do it well enough, that everything that is harmed or broken will become whole again quickly. So instead of that, we're invited into what I think is really a more honest type of healing, a healing that is going to unfold by patience, by return, and that makes room for complexity and for wholeness, healing the heart, the body, our nervous systems, our memories, our hopes and disappointments. And this is where this season of the Omer comes in. During the counting of the Omer, we count each day. It's not a focus on the destination. It's not a focus on where we're going, but it's day 1, day 2, day 3. It's this incremental, really slow passage. And so that's the work here. It's showing up day after day and letting change happen really slowly through this returning our attention. And in many ways, this is what we're doing here today in the daily sit. It's very similar to a meditation practice, right? If we can stay present long enough, if we can return to that even when we stray from it, if we can stay with that long enough to notice maybe even just a really subtle shift over time. So I know we are eager to get into the practice, so we'll leave with just that framing, but I really want to offer and center this idea that healing this month and beyond doesn't have to be linear to be real. It's not a ladder. What's maybe broken or harmed doesn't need to disappear for us to be in a place that is sacred and holy. And that transformation is not about perfection, it's about meeting ourselves with honesty and compassion each day. So, as we prepare to begin our meditation practice, I just want to leave you with a question to sit with. Where in you right now is healing underway, even if incomplete? And where are you being asked for patience? And what would it be like to trust a process that you cannot fully see? And with that, I'd love to invite us to begin by settling into an easeful and supportive position for our practice today. If that means moving, if that means making your way to a reclining position, turning off your camera if you prefer, adjusting your seat, just take a minute to settle in and allow your body to be supported by whatever is beneath you. The chair, cushion, maybe the ground. Finding your way to a steady, gentle gaze, lowering your gaze or even letting the eyes close if comfortable. Begin to just arrive in the simple fact of being here. Your body's breath without forcing, without improving anything, just beginning to arrive. Now, we'll begin by taking 3 deep breaths together, each one deeper than the next. Again, a slightly deeper breath in. And a full breath out through the mouth. And one more. Inviting this breath to be the deepest one you've taken today. With that, just let your breath return to its natural rhythm. Gently bring your attention to the places where the body makes contact with support. Your feet on the ground. Support in the seat, chair, cushion. Place that your hands are resting. Let yourself feel just held in this moment. And gently invite you to notice the movement of breath within your body. Maybe at the nostrils, chest, perhaps in the belly if you're breathing deeply. You don't need to force any particular structure. Just let the breath be known. And if it is helpful, silently, you might simply say to yourself the words here on the inhale and now on the exhale. Here, now. If your mind begins to wander, it's not a mistake. It's just part of this wandering path of this season. As with healing, attention is not linear. If you notice you've drifted, gently begin again. You might even think of each breath as each count of the Omer. Never rushing, never skipping, following the same rhythm. This breath, now this breath. If you sense any pain present or any discomfort in the body, the heart, or the mind, let it be acknowledged without needing to fix. If there is restlessness, let that be held gently in awareness, 2. Maybe there's spaciousness that can be here too. Just see if you can allow this moment to be exactly as it is. Healing is unfolding. There's no need to rush. Resting again in the rhythm of our breath. As you stay in the breath, soften when you notice your effort hardening. Soften. You notice judgment. Soften. You notice impatience. Soften. Our work is not to force healing. Our work is to make space for what is with compassion. If you'd like, I invite you to just bring a hand to the heart, maybe to the belly, offering yourself and a gift of kindness that you might offer a beloved. Inwardly saying, may I be patient with the pace of my own becoming. May I trust what's working within me, even when I cannot see it. May I be held in the long arc of healing. Now, begin to deepen the breath just slightly. Feeling again the body here in contact with the ground, the air on your skin, noticing what is here now. Nothing else, just this moment of return. And as we close our practice, taking the intention that we count in this season because each day matters. Each breath matters. And when you're ready, beginning to invite a little movement back into the body, starting by wiggling fingers, letting the eyes open if they've been closed, maybe inviting in some natural stretch and movement as you return to our room together and we close our practice. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lily, for that really, really lovely and restorative and healing practice. And friends, let's seal it as we do every day. For those of you who are in mourning or observing a yard site, want to encourage you to put the name or names of those you're remembering and honoring today in the chat. I neglected at the outset, and I regret that I neglected to mention that our practice today is sponsored by Corey Tratner in memory of her husband, Henry Hazenbush. And Corey, thank you for that. And for Corey and for all those who are honoring the memory and lifting up the souls of loved ones, please put their names in the chat, either now or after we recite Kaddish. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, as always, I invite you to stay present to support those who are in the course of their own mourning process. If you're reciting Kaddish, please join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Yitdash Shemirabash,
Amen.
Mad Yirach Yirach Yikon, Yomechon, El, Gala, Isma, Ru, Me, Ish, Me, Rabba, Mevarach, Lame, Amaya, Barach, V'Yitavach, Har, V'Yitamam, V'Yitnaseh, Ed Yisrael Shemei Tekusha Ela Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata V'Shukata Amin Anma Alma Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Mishamaya V'Chaim El Kol Yisrael Amen. Shalom B'Yamav Hu Yaseh Shalom V'Yehi Al Kol Yisrael V'Al Kol Yoshvei Tevel Yimru
Amen. Grant peace to us, to all Israel. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. May all those who are in mourning be comforted among all who mourn. Once again, I want to thank Harry Gobo for holding our text space faithfully as always, and thank Corey Tratner, who's one of our stalwart members of our community, for sponsoring today's practice in loving memory of your husband, Henry. Zichrono Libracha, may his memory be a blessing always. Corey, thank you so much for honoring him today and for supporting our practice together today. And of course, I want to thank Lily Swanbrow Becker from At the Well for leading us in really just a beautiful, beautiful practice today. Everyone's invited to continue, if you'd like, turn off the sound on your device and sit with us for another 15 minutes or join us for conversation. And if you have a question you'd like to ask Lily, you can put it in the chat. Just write question all in caps, and I'll try to integrate that into our conversation. And Lily, that was really, you're muted, just FYI. There you go. So wonderful. It was just a beautiful practice today. And I see a lot of appreciation in the chat. I guess to just first, just some points of appreciation. I really appreciated the focus on how we're in a stage, a portion of the year, which really emphasizes the significance of noticing steps along the journey. And ER is the only month in the Hebrew calendar in which every day is the day of the Omer. You know, Nisan is part of it, and Sivan has part of it, but ER is all Omer all the time. And you so beautifully lifted up that the practice of counting the Omer or being attentive to the Omer is really about just bringing close attention to unfolding, to how our lives unfold, how the world unfolds, and also trusting that process. So that, thank you for that. Dayenu, that's enough right there. But I do know that, and I do want to give a shout out to At the Well and your moon manuals. And for those who haven't done this, if you just go to the At the Well site, for every Hebrew month, you can download what they call a moon manual, which gives you all kinds of practices and beautiful background about the particular month. And the month of ER is devoted to the theme of healing. So I wanted to actually invite you to talk a little bit about that, because you alluded to that, right? As part of the, so can you just like maybe elucidate or just like enlighten folks a little bit about why ER is about healing and how we would be attentive to that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, there are a few lenses to look at it through, and the one that I wanted to lift up in the practice today, and I think comes through most naturally to me, is healing as a journey. So I think that's part of it. Is the month of ER is a month of seeking and journeying and wandering, and that is what healing is. You know, we often want to think of it as I need to rest to heal, or I need maybe something to happen to heal, but healing is always work. And so it is, I do think it's hand in hand with that practice of daily ritual, daily observance, daily return to what is simple and what's in front of you, and embracing the path that can take, which sometimes can be very challenging. So I think, it is in that time in the calendar where we are going on a journey where the destination is not the focus, and looking at healing as something that happens gradually over time, right? Rather than we're going to arrive somewhere and be and be held and be healed. And that's actually a really challenging thing to do. That's not, particularly natural for most of us, me included. I think the other thing that I would say is lifting up the seasonal quality of ER as being this time of spring and of emergence that I think is really beautiful. It is a time when we've been waiting for a long time in the calendar before, right? In Nisan, but also in Shvat, mostly just for spring to arrive, right? There's all of this,
Right.
like all these months before that are this quiet, the earth moving underground and the soil waking up, but we can't see anything yet. And this is the time where it is in full bloom. It kind of started last month in Nisan, but this is where everything is radiating out, right? And we have this beautiful sense of springtime that we can see, depending on where we are in the world, but generally for a lot of us, where we can really feel it and experience it. And that is a healing. And I think it's very beautiful how the calendar follows the rhythm of earth, and gives us elements from the seasons to connect with that we can take into our own lives. So that is just one offering of ER. If you can, just go out and enjoy the springtime.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's interesting, like what you said is, I think the bottom line here is that part of the point is that the changes that we notice take place in the natural realm, in the historical realm, in terms of how it tracks with the story of like having left Egypt and passed through the sea, and now the day by day wandering in the wilderness. And the tradition, I believe, is that manna started to fall during ER as well, and the healing powers of manna. And just throwing into the mix also, this is noted in the Moon Manual, that the Hebrew letters of the word ER act as an acronym for Ani Adonai Rofecha. I am the Holy One, your healer. Also want to point out in the chat, that the healing applies not just to physical healing, as Joe Metzler writes in the chat, also for emotional healing and grieving as well. So there is a question, though, that did come up in the chat that's really, I think, probably others' minds as well. Ronna Davis wrote, "It's increasingly seems that being aware of the unfolding in my life and the world is out of sync with the devastation and recklessness in the world." So that makes me think about this. Actually, this is attributed to Martin Luther King, but I think he got it from somewhere else that I don't know. But the whole idea about the moral arc of the universe bending towards justice, which corresponds to this idea of this kind of gradual unfolding and trusting in that unfolding, even though the moral arc of the universe is long. So it's hard to detect, it's incremental and maybe even almost sometimes imperceptible. So that's, like, I would say, like, that's how I would answer that question, is that, yeah, we can't always tell, we may have an impression, right? But we don't know how things are actually unfolding in the bigger picture of things. So Rana's question was, how do I use my practice in service of being a loving warrior against what is destructive? You want to respond to that one?
That's a hard one. I love that question.
It's a good question, but it is a hard one.
That is a hard one. And I think it is a practice, is what I would say. It's not something that you will, for most of us, that we can attain easily or quickly. But I think what you said, Mark, it is that idea of practicing the trust in this long arc that we can't see, and opening to and accepting the fact that at some points, like, I'm forgetting the name of who asked that wonderful question, but as they lift it up, thank you, that it appears that it's going in absolutely the other direction, the wrong direction in our own lives and in the world, and that can be very painful. And so I think part of the practice is of moving through that and meeting that with love and acceptance, and that it is something that one has to practice every day, sometimes failing at in order to begin to hold the complexity that is that realization.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm into that. I would say, just like personally, that's like, I think I notice that that's true for me because I definitely feel that, as many do, that, what feels like a disconnect, it feels like the world's falling apart, so how can I feel like, things are unfolding and becoming in a way. But I know that, and I think At the Well lifts this up so beautifully by connecting Jewish practice to earth-based, insight and practice. We have so much to learn from the Torah of the earth, right? So that noticing the process of unfolding and also of dying, right? Of retreat. Like, spring is great, but I'm one of those people who sees that first leaf. I mentioned this earlier, like was thrilled to see the first leaf of the spring. And my mind is already thinking, you know, in a few months, it's going to be brown and dried out and falling, right? And then it's going to be winter again. Hard to stay present, I'm thinking ahead like that. But that's all part of the cycle, and trusting in that cycle of, rebirth and dying. And I know grief and end of life has come up in the chat as well. Um, just in terms of putting a point on what, healing as a theme here, um, this in the Torah, the story of Bnei Yisrael, the Israelites passing through the sea, the first thing that happens is that they find this water that's, tastes bitter, and they complain about it. And God tells Moses to throw a stick into the water and it becomes sweet. And there, God introduces the idea that the divine is a healing power. And so that becomes the theme. In some ways, might think about like, the whole wandering in the wilderness as a healing from the trauma of slavery, however you want to frame it, right? It could be physical healing, but it could be, intergeneration healing from intergenerational trauma, and that we can't really enter the land until we go through that process of healing, which is why the Torah says, I mean, yeah, there was a shortcut. They could have just gone right into the land, but they couldn't do that. It required this day by day and not knowing where they were going to be the next day. Which I find very powerful.
Yeah,
Allergy.
I think that's, well, geez. I love that point though that you just made, Mark. That's one of my favorite things to think about with the theme of this month and the healing journey, that it is a soul journey. And I mean, imagine that. Imagine walking out and
Mhm.
not knowing where you are going and that type of process. And in some ways, we're all on that type of process. This is what I love about the calendars, that there are ways to apply it, to our own
Yeah,
lives, but it's really powerful to think about.
yeah. Um, Towards the end of the practice, you just had a really exquisite, I would say, invitation about, some people caught it for verbatim, being patient with our own unfolding. And by the way, so yes, people can save the transcript, by the way, if you want to, but also know, of course, that the recording is posted on our YouTube channel, and if possible, maybe we'll turn this one into our Jewish Meditation for Everyone podcast, which does have a transcript with it as well. So just everyone can know that if you really appreciate it today. Do you remember what you said? There was like, I
Yes.
remember, yeah, you got the phrases that were beautiful.
I put it here in the chat. I think I
Oh,
said, may I be present with my own becoming. May I
mm-hmm,
trust what is working in me, even when I cannot see it clearly.
mm,
And may I be held in the long arc of healing.
that's a keeper. That's beautiful. It makes me think of, and for people who want to continue with that theme, yeah, that is a keeper, Joe. Thank you. Um, there is a blessing by the Celtic poet John O'Donoghue, who writes blessings. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah.
him, Lily. Yeah, sure. Of course you are. One of his is called Blessings for a New Beginning, which was one of my favorites that people, it's in his book, A Book of Blessings, I think. Um, And if anybody wants to Google that quickly, A Blessing for a New Beginning, John O'Donohue, it's exactly on point. It's really, in fact, I was thinking that that's where my mind went when you offered that. Um, that new beginnings, new beginnings as they were, start before we are actually aware of them, which is what I was thinking about when you're talking about Shvat, like, Tu B'Shvat. Spring starts actually earlier. And one of the beauties of the Jewish calendar is that it helps us notice that even before. Like otherwise, this would be, oh, this is this ER is the springtime focus. But actually, Shvat is also, even in the northern hemisphere, is a springtime focus for us. Even if it's 5 degrees out, and the ground is frozen, we can have an awareness that nature's still at work there, and things are happening. Even when it doesn't seem like they're happening. And that, I guess, to go back to that really hard question, right? That I find extremely helpful to think, there are things happening that I'm not aware of right now, um, that are a force towards affirming life and freedom and newness and, justice, and not to be passive in that process, but to be aware that there's a real power in that. All right, we are at time. Thank you, Harry. I'm right on top of it, Harry. Thank you so much. Um, Encourage people to download that John O'Donohue poem, take that into your day and Shabbat and month of year. Lily, this was really special, beautiful session today. Thank you so much.
So wonderful.
Totally filling Sarah's shoes and really complimenting us. So we're very grateful for this partnership with At the Well around Rosh Chodesh. We look forward to seeing you in about a month. And want to wish everyone Shabbat Shalom and a Chodesh Tov, and here's to a year, here's to a month of healing of all kinds and of hope as well. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Take good care.
Thank you.